Triple Triad is definitely something that whilst on Final Fantasy XIV I don't go insanely wild for in terms of collection or spending much time invested into anymore. It is one of the best minigames in any of the MMORPGs that I've played over the years. Whilst the game itself is based very obviously on Final Fantasy VIII's iteration, there are a lot of differences between the two iterations, namely that you don't actually lose cards if you play badly in Final Fantasy XIV, whereas in 8, well, the save outside of town and retry technique is something that we all employ. Save scumming is pretty much guaranteed to be used on a playthrough if you're after all of the cards. So there are things that made the original Triple Triad not quite so great, but there are actually some things I do wish were in 14's version, as I think personally that we would get a lot more replayability and indeed enjoyment out of the minigame without really having to do anything too crazy as an implementation. Firstly, let's talk about the card system. That's card in capitals, C-A-R-D. This is something that blew my mind when I first played 8 when I was a young child. The fact that once you had learnt Quetzalcoatl's card ability, you could then use the card command in battle. Bosses and NPCs were mostly not cardable, but all of the overworld monsters, with only a few small exceptions, could actually be acquired in your card collection by defeating them and capturing them in battle. To young Meoni back then, this was the equivalent of Pokemon mixed with collectible cards, two of the things that I loved and adored. A heady mix of all of the addictive qualities that I craved from a minigame, and as soon as I found it in 8, I was hooked for life. Most people describe Final Fantasy VIII as a card game with a confusing time-related side story in the background. Whilst I don't completely agree with the storyline of 8 being poop, I do understand the situation. You unlock a new town. Oh yay, more storyline. But wait, there are NPCs. I must go around and press square on each and every last one of these to see if we can actually do battle in Triple Triad. Basically completely forgetting the storyline and embracing the card addiction like we should. And to NPCs that don't play cards, those are just less interesting overall. So the ability to beat a monster in Final Fantasy XIV within an inch of its life and then get a chance to actually collect its card or use an ability to collect its card would be absolutely amazing. And can you think of the potential possibilities? There are so many monsters of varying types just from the low level areas, and this game is absolutely enormous. Can you imagine the variety and the recolors and the sort of things you could collect? So this has all come about because there was a discussion lately in the press on how hard it is to get players into older zones in MMORPGs. Well, this is easily one of the things that I would suggest for 14. Blue Mage wasn't exactly incredible at endgame, but at least for the first few weeks when players were actually collecting abilities, they were out in the world capturing abilities from monsters. They had to go to these low-level areas and dungeons they haven't done in years, stuff like that. Technically, they could just use the same technique to get cards with the same horrific RNG, and you know what? A ton of us would still show up to do it. Triple Triad doesn't have any major problems in 14, it's not bad nor is it any less addictive than 8's version in my opinion, but I think we can all agree there is so much more potential with the tools they have on hand that could really bring new stuff to the game without really any big changes. The other aspect of Final Fantasy VIII's version of Triple Triad was the ability to create items from cards. This is slightly less transferable perhaps to 14 and could be quite controversial, but in 8 you basically ended up farming certain cards and then turning them in for materials for weapon upgrades, magic, usable items in battle, that sort of stuff. The beauty of how this could work in 14 is when you get multiple cards, the current only method of actually doing anything with them is to turn them in at the gold saucer for low amounts of MGP in return, which is absolutely fine. But what if we could turn a bomb card, for example, into grenade ash or something like that? Basic materials that we could then use to, further our crafting, or at least we could sell them on the market board and make some money from materials that might be less obtained these days from people farming. And indeed, we could even introduce new crafting materials to the game through the card system exclusively to make new furniture, etc. The possibilities are endless, as you can imagine. I'm not saying that Triple Triad needs changing, but if we were to get some of the parts from 8's version, then I think it could be really quite cool. Anything that keeps me going back to content is always a welcome addition, and I think looking back on the simple things that we have in the game already, such as the other minigames in the Gold Saucer, many of these could be easily elaborated on and played on and put elsewhere in the game, like with many examples I've given with just Triple Triad here, and really flesh out the reason to go to different places again in this massive open world that sadly once an expansion ends many simply leave behind, and some of them never return. I mean, how many of you can actually say you've gone back to the spawn of Behemoth after, we've done 2.0? How many people have actually gone through Coerthus and just walked around? I know a few of you will say you have, but for the most part, there isn't really much reason to go there apart from if you're leveling your gathering or crafters and then making a bit of gil maybe, but you don't really do anything else in those zones. You don't really see that many people in Bent Branch Meadows, for example, or so in many ways I think this is just one of the things as an example they could think about and maybe elaborate on in the future. Either way, thank you all kindly for watching this video. Let me know what you think about this and what you would like to see to make you go back to these old areas and really engage with older content, because for the most part is there really much of an incentive to do so. We do have NPCs out in the wild, like I say, that you can challenge to Triple Triad, but is that enough? Let me know below and I'll see you all next time.